things work, but I mean, a lot of people watched, so that's cool.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that pastor, you need to talk to that dude.
Yeah, he seems like a good guy. All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. If you're watching this before it's rendered, go ahead and skip about a minute forward. We're going to give it a minute for some people to join, and then we will get going. So, Zach, how was your day?
Boot, scoot, and boogie, baby, all friggin' day long. It was just one big train wreck into a cum dumpster fire after another. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good stuff. Oh, man.
How was your day?
It was an exciting day.
Was it for you too?
A little bit. Trying to get stuff done. And sadly, there's too much to get done in order to get it done. But we're making progress. Okay. We got a couple people joining us, so let's go ahead and get started. So tonight, what we're going to be looking at is an article from The Guardian regarding Trump's pressure on the media. At least that's what it's suggesting, that, quote, billionaires and corporations are leading TV networks and newspapers to cave to the president's pressure. So we'll take a look at the evidence provided, discuss the intersection of politics, journalism, public perception, and ask some good questions. Because I'll be honest, I don't really buy what the article is having to sell that much, but while thinking about how bad the arguments were a bit, or just being critical of it, it brought up some good questions. Like, can media truly be independent, or is it just inherently political? Is there a misconception that it is not political? I found myself a little bit jaded while thinking about this and asking, how do we change it? Is it the people's, or is it the government's responsibility to be informed about these things? I'm not sure. So we'll take a look and we'll go from there. Oh, we should probably turn that on. 1 second. 1 minute.
There are two major networks that have came out and said they are entertainment networks and not news outlets anymore.
Which they should. Here we are. Get that. Perfect. Now we're going.
But the people that take those media outlets as word it's gospel would probably say they were forced to do it by this, that, and the other.
Yeah. Okay. Move that like a little bit away from your face. Just a little bit.
You.
Just because your sniffing is coming up like crazy. Okay. There you go.
See, I can't. Well, I got to sniff.
Okay.
You need to keep a box of Kleenex in here.
I guess so. All right. So here's the article from The Guardian. And he's become America's assignment editor. U.S. media owners bend to Trump. Billionaires and corporations leading TV networks and newspapers seem to have caved to the president's pressure. Gosh dang it, I need to do this. I want this one. There we go. That's what we want. Okay. So, this is by Edward Helmore. This was on Sunday, the 2nd of February. Now, in a tumultuous first 2 weeks back in power in the White House, Donald Trump has targeted many familiar enemies, including one of his most passionate obsessions, the U.S. media, whom he has frequently dubbed enemies of the people. Now, I think that this is an interesting argument because one of the things, like I said, I'm kind of jaded about this, but don't all those in power do this to some degree? The implications of political influence over journalism, I think, just exists in general. It's not just the right, like plenty of political parties on the left that have been in power criticize the right side of the media. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
isn't it fair game a bit?
It used to not be. I'm old enough to remember when news was fact as those people perceived it. It was not politicized as the way it is now. It was actually, you could get your information from that and believe it to a large percentage. Most of it was true to the people presenting that news. Now, they could have been maybe wrong or misquoting, but to the people presenting the news, they knew that for them it was true. I mean, they would vet their sources. They would, they would fact check. They would really investigate. And now it's just like people, they make up a political viewpoint and try to cherry pick and even make stuff up blatantly to reinforce whatever political statement they're trying to make.
I definitely agree that there's a political statement to be made. And I think a lot of it has to do with the evolution of media and infotainment,
Yes.
One thing I did look up while listening to the arguments of this article is how much media is produced, for example, like in the New York Times. And it is crazy. It is absolutely crazy, dude. I mean, we're talking hundreds of posts, whether it be blogs, articles, videos, what have you, a day. And I mean, how can you be correct on every single one of those? It is just something to consume. And I feel like that is what media has become now, is just something to consume and spread. But getting back to the political part of it, that is how it becomes highly political, because we move to this viral culture in the media.
It used to be back in the day, if a journalist presented false information,
right, they were held accountable.
They had to be they had to come up and make a public apology,
a retraction.
Yeah, and they could lose their job or lose their standing.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just, it doesn't seem to matter at all.
No,
as long as it's entertaining, like you said.
A bit. So next paragraph. Trump's new federal communications chair, Brendan Carr, is reported to have ordered an investigation into the sponsorship practices of taxpayer-supported NPR and PBS member stations, a media network long hated by conservatives who accuse it of a liberal slant, which honestly I've never heard. That's new to me. Yeah, have you ever heard that?
It's got a liberal slant?
Yeah.
I would assume that maybe to a slight extent it does, because it's...
But not extreme.
No, it's not like one side or the other. It would just be, I mean, it's public broadcast station, public. I mean, so it's got like the average Joe.
Right. Anybody.
Yes.
I just have never really heard that before, at least in conversations with those on the right. But...
Well, that's part of the thing. If it's from PBS, in all likelihood, it's going to be true. The right doesn't like that.
Well, maybe, but it's on the other side too, right?
It is. I don't think it's quite as extreme. The left seems to bitch about everything, so that when something really big and bad happens, it's just, they're still bitching about, it's just more wah 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 wah, instead of like picking their battles.
I just think their political strategies suck.
They don't get anything done.
No. Next paragraph. At the same time, and just as concerning for some media watchers, core segments of the U.S. media landscape, via the wealthy billionaires and gigantic corporations that own them, have seemingly caved under Trump's pressure, or apparently sought to curry favor with the new administration. Now, this comes up with Mark Zuckerberg, right? With Facebook moving to community notes. And, I looked into that a bit, and research does show that it's effective. However, research does show that fact-checking is also highly effective.
Yeah, and you were just saying, why don't they have both?
Yeah. And that is one thing. They should incorporate both of them. I mean, I literally just wrote a grant for that app for $500,000 about incorporating the two. And there's a lot of research that supports it.
So he's got Mark Zuckerberg and he's got Elon Musk coming out hailing Hitler for him. Like,
I don't think that's what that was, but nonetheless. On Thursday, the New York Times reported that CBS News parent Paramount is in talks to settle a $10 billion claim that it deceptively edited a 60 Minutes interview with Kamala Harris. Paramount is currently concluding an asset sale of its Hollywood studio business. What that was about is, like it said, there was an interview. Apparently, there were some posts where they are claimed to have edited a question that was given to her, and they gave another, like a different statement that she made as an answer. They did recently publish the transcript. I haven't looked at it, but hey, if it's legit, good.
that's messed up, dude.
If it's true, I mean, here it says there is no evidence that the interview was deliberately edited beyond normal practices, but the Trump team has not held back. Edward Pulsick, a lawyer for Trump in the case, said real accountability for CBS and Paramount will ensure that the president is compensated for the harm done to him and will deter the fake news from further distorting the facts to advance a partisan agenda. What?
It's just so ironic that Trump is suing people for misleading the public with fake news.
I get it. He is very good at swaying public opinion with these terms and phrases such as fake news. It's an effective strategy. I kind of respect it. Actually, I do respect it.
He'll call what he said the night before in a public address when he goes on the news the next day and reverses himself. He'll call what he said the night before fake news. I've seen it over and over and over.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about how it's framed. I don't know. I've slowed down my news consumption to just analyzing the news rather than consuming a ton of it, but being particular about what I do. So, the news of Paramount's decision, which has reportedly caused deep upset in the CBS newsroom, comes after ABC News agreed to pay $15 million to Trump to settle a defamation lawsuit over inaccurate comments by anchor George Stephanopoulos that Trump had been found civilly liable for rape. That is a big claim. It also follows the move by social media giant Meta to pay $25 million to settle a First Amendment protections claim for impermissible censorship when it bounced Trump from Facebook and Instagram in 2021. About $22 million of that fee will be a donation of Trump's presidential library. Now, like these claims and different things like that, I mean, this is just an appeasement. That's a tax write-off for Meta, literally.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a political donation. I mean, and they can do whatever they want. They can bounce whoever they want. It's a private owned company, and it happens all the time. So, this is part of that jaded feeling that I'm talking about, where it's like, look at this comment. Meta's chief executive, the tech billionaire Mark Zuckerberg, has grown increasingly close to Trump since he won the 2024 election, including visiting him at Mar-a-Lago and celebrating with him at his inauguration. Now, just hanging out for a couple hours, I mean, they are influential people, but it does also make sense that influential people hang out with each other, at least a little bit. I mean, it just seems natural for these relationships to occur and to be a bit transactional. I mean,
if Trump invited you to come hang out with him, would you?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, I understand the suggestions behind it, but some of it, I feel like it's just the game. It's just how things work. And it wouldn't be different whether it be on one side or the other. So, In each instance, the huge companies have been accused of putting larger corporate interests before the credibility of their news divisions or ethical judgments, and of making payoffs to keep the peace with the new president, or perhaps with an eye on future business opportunities, right? The transactional nature of things. And Trump paints the media as this like bad source of information. He's very good at it. And, these people that are picked, I think it's important that we like consider who these sources of information are. Like, what's coming up here? He's dictating the news on his terms, said Michelle LaRosa, spokesperson for the former First Lady, Jill Biden. He's become America's assignment editor. Okay? Like, that's cool. Anyone can say that. I mean, what gives that opinion more credibility is what I'm getting at.
You know what I'm seeing from this, though? What I'm seeing is, I'm seeing it from a slant that these companies are being accused of doing this and that to Trump and having to pay him off. It's making the fake news around Trump, his say that there is fake news, more legitimate. That's the way I am seeing this.
Right. That it's been justified.
Yes. I'm seeing it as it's a win-win from his side. You can't believe it and you can't believe it.
Right.
Either way you look at it.
Right. I get that. That's valid.
Unless he says it's true.
Right.
Then you can believe it.
And I mean, a lot of these legal claims, if you got the money, you can file whatever you want. You can make whatever allegation you want.
And he's got the back and the legal teams to just ride them into the ground to where they're paying more than the money they paid out in legal fees after a certain amount of time.
I think, though, like public perception is much of this just isn't serious anymore, because there's so much doubt now of what we consume in the media. I don't know, just a thought. So, meanwhile, media personalities associated with some high-profile criticism of Trump or his Republican allies have started to leave the scene, including NBC's former Meet the Press host Chuck Todd and CNN's Jim Acosta, who was one of the most famous Trump-critical journalists on American television, but who left his network after his show was shunted to a midnight slot. So again, it's the suggestion that this has happened due to Trump taking power in one way or another. But maybe the company just said, hey, what you were doing, it didn't work, and it's really not going to work now. We're not going to make money from it anymore, so go somewhere else. That's just how it works. It's just how it works. Other examples that have rolled American media are racking up. The Washington Post, owned by Amazon billionaire Jeff Bezos, endorsed Trump's pick for Attorney General election denier Pam Bondi, calling her qualified and serious. Before the election, it killed an endorsement of Kamala Harris. At the same time, Amazon recently paid the First Lady, Melania Trump, a staggering $40 million for the rights to a documentary about her life. So, again, more suggestions. But one, you pay people for the rights for work. For example, for the documentary.
Yes, it's
and also, Bezos, he owns the company. It may affect the Post. He has the choice to do that.
Like I said, I'm just seeing you can't believe it and you can't believe it. Either way you look at it, this is a win-win.
So I guess one of the big questions is like, how do we change it? Will there always be this intersection between politics and the media? I think so. I just think the degree of it could possibly be handled another way, but then how do you do that? Do we enact laws? And then, of course, there would be the issue of what free speech is. but how do we monetize engagement in our, or excuse me, not monetize engagement, but monetize integrity in the media rather than engagement?
They're to bring back journalistic integrity.
But how? With like the evolution of media, and this is one thing that Trump is very good at. He is good at shifting with the times, or at least the people who work with him are good at it, but he has always employed social media as an effective political strategy. Whereas I would say the other side is not as good at it. But I mean, it does bring up the serious discussion of, should we enact like federal legislation into what news is? I mean, we do have syndicated news outlets, and that's the term that we use, that are licensed. But I mean, should we limit it to how many adjectives are used in an article?
What needs to be done is there needs to be a network that comes out, and that network has some sort of a framework that used to be there for networks and journalistic integrity. And if you were proved to be giving false information, you were held accountable. And doesn't seem to be done anymore. The networks themselves would, like, you could get fired. Right. Even if you were saying something that by all means you thought was true from your research, and you're you have integrity. Yeah, you could still be fired, and your whole career, you could be, lose your career over
what you say.
Yeah, saying something that was false, and that doesn't seem to matter anymore.
Well, in the next paragraph, let's check this out, because an individual that is criticized in this paragraph, I actually looked up, and it's interesting what he is suggesting. So moving forward, meanwhile, at the Los Angeles Times, the billionaire owner Patrick Soon-Shiong recently killed an editorial criticizing Trump's cabinet picks and has granted significant editorial influence to Trump's cheerleader Scott Jennings. So I looked up this guy, and he actually seems pretty cool. I like what he had to say. So this is an article about him. LA Times billionaire owner killed op-ed that was critical of Trump's cabinet picks, reporter says. And so op-ed, so it's an opinion editorial. Now, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong killed an opinion column that was critical of President-elect Donald Trump's recent cabinet picks, telling his paper's editorial board that it could only publish the piece if it also ran an editorial with an opposing view. And that's according to the New York Times, which is a pretty legitimate, publication. So, I mean, maybe he was justified. I mean, he did strong arm it a bit, but if he's saying, hey, you can say whatever you want, just hold another opinion as well, that's reasonable.
But the way the media is portrayed today, like you just said, it's just going to be, they're just going to say whatever they want to bash whatever the statement, the first publication was, and make it they're totally going to contradict each other. And then you'll be looking at both things going, which one do I believe?
Right. And I think just an issue in general is it's an op-ed, right? But how many people perceive it as an opinion piece?
Nobody seems to understand that stuff anymore.
Right. So what steps should we take? I mean, with independent media, the way that it is now, by independent media, I mean shows like this, podcasts, what have you, that are seen as legitimate based on the individual.
Is that me?
I think so. They are given this public appearance of integrity based on the amount of people that follow them. But just because they have a large group following doesn't necessarily mean that they're a source of good information, or they've been educated in a manner in order to understand ethics of media, the effect they might have on the public, or just a critical way to analyze information.
They could be 100% the opposite of that, because they're saying outlandish statements that cause a lot of ruckus and get people fired up. And that's why they have a lot of followers.
Yeah.
I mean,
instead of looking at this, we could be doing other things or acting in more extreme fashions like we would in the other room on the stage. But
I know I try to bring it in. It's hard.
Well, the other way is a little bit more fun, and you get more attention, right?
You do, but it's the news wasn't about attention.
Right.
It used to not be about attention. It
was
shouldn't
about
be.
Educating the public.
Yes, and that's why I get a lot of, if I'm actually looking for something that I feel is going to be more true, I go to something like the BBC.
Right.
Which I'm not saying they're always going to be 100% accurate, but they don't really have as much of a dog in the fight.
But think of that most recent YouTube video that we watched during one of the shows that was from a British media company that might as well have been painted blue all the way across of it.
But that's a different company than BBC is, like a news outlet.
Right.
That was like an entertainment.
I'm just saying, from a source of the country, it didn't really seem to matter as much. But yes, the BBC has definitely had a perception of increased integrity.
Well, I'm just saying another country's news is going to have less. And then you got to research that as well, because I'm saying that, but then like Russia is going to have a different slant on what's happening here than,
absolutely,
than say the BBC will.
Absolutely. So there was another part in this article where this individual made an excellent comment, or at least had an excellent idea. And here it is. Earlier this month, during a podcast appearance with Jennings, Sun Xiong declared he would add an AI-powered bias meter to the newspaper's opinion and news coverage as part of his effort to present both sides of the story to readers. The Times Guild quickly met his proposal with a rebuke, which said Sun, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Xiong, had publicly suggested his staff harbors bias without offering evidence or examples. I believe everybody holds a bias. And second, I think the AI-powered bias meter is a great thing to do. I mean, people are quick to, move away from AI, whether it be censorship or flagging or things in general. But what makes you trust a person more?
Nothing nowadays.
Right.
I mean,
if it's an open source code where the public has access to it, what's to hide? I think it's a great idea.
What's a bias meter?
So what he's saying is probably some type of meter that shows that it's on the left or on the right of politics. The article itself.
People can't see that immediately just by reading it?
I don't think necessarily people consider that they are choosing a source of media for a specific purpose. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think people who choose to watch CNN are necessarily going to it as a source of information. They're going for it at a means of like a confirmation bias. They know what they're going to get. They know they're going to get the angle that they want. And it's the same on the right, like when they choose to go to Fox News.
Yes.
We do specifically choose what news outlets, to go to and what information to consume.
And people don't realize that they are getting...
But they don't realize that they're doing it necessarily. And that's the thing.
Because my friend's mother, I talked to her and she was saying I needed to watch Fox News. And I was trying to say, so you're telling me that all the other news networks get together and decide what they're gonna put out for the day together before they put out the news, and Fox News will just put out Fox News, the only real one, and the other news networks, this was years ago.
Yeah.
They will get together and put out the fake thing. They will decide on what the fake news they're going to present, and Fox News is the real one. And she believed that 100%, that the other news networks would all get together and decide what they were going to put out there.
Well, I do think it's a good idea to go to different sources for media. The one thing is, though, now is you're going to another source to get another opinion. It's not necessarily a source for information. I mean, think about how long it actually takes to say a plane crashed. It's a sentence, maybe 2 sentences after to get into the details, but it turns into a 5 to 10 minute discussion. The news was 3 sentences long, right? But it becomes a story
about the prior administration, like policy on the FAA, and just like
just everything. It's crazy. It's crazy. But I think this bias meter is a great idea, and it is kind of coming up. There was it's either an app or a website that I seen a sponsorship ad for, and it did employ something like this, and I think it's a great idea. I mean, the journalists shouldn't be afraid of it, right? Like, they should have no concern over it if they're journalists. I mean, why would they care if it has something rating their bias?
The only thing I could see is if, say, you were a journalist who specifically, like, your specific journalistic road was interviewing Democrats who work in the Pentagon or something.
Right.
Then you're going to always be, you're not, nobody's going to believe you because you're always going to be like, wham, always on the blue.
Right. I get that.
You just asked, like, why would somebody care? That's just the only example I could think of off the top of my head. But
I do think that this individual, he seems reasonable, and I don't necessarily find that the reason that he quote unquote killed it, even though he just he proposed an option and they rejected a reasonable option, in my opinion. So that's where I'm seeing it's just not a legitimate claim.
I think they should come up with a network for media outlet, and to be able to present your news on this outlet, you have to sign an agreement, because there's all kinds of, if you sign up for a job and there's certain things that you do on that job, if you sign the agreement to go into that line of work, if you break those agreements, you could be held legally accountable.
Right.
So for this network, if you sign up to be a journalist or present any sort of media that you're presenting as fact, and it is proven to be false, then you could be held liable in a court of law. And if you're not able to prove that from your resources, what you presented was what you thought, by
the evidence that you had,
as compelling as, like by a legal standard, what is that called? By a reasonable doubt. Like you had no reasonable doubt at all that it was false. Then if it's proven that you were just blatantly giving false information, then you could be held liably accountable.
Yeah, like defamation
on this specific news network.
Right. Next up, at the same time, Trump has set the pace, dominating the news cycle with a flood of executive orders and actions, raids of undocumented immigrants, fast-moving international disputes, contentious cabinet confirmations, interpretations of the causes of a tragic air crash in Washington, D.C., and much more. Well, I would say you can do that when you're president. I mean, that's just how it works. When you're president, you are going to get a lot of attention about your actions. Drowning out rivals or dissenting voices is a trademark of Trump's communication style, and the U.S. media is struggling to adjust to the new realities of reporting a Trump administration that is committed to a shock and awe policy of rapidly upending many aspects of American life and politics.
See, that is so flagrant of a accusation. I'm seeing that as coming from the right to make the left look bad.
Mm.
And you can look at that as like the left trying to make the right look bad.
Yeah. I mean, the shock and awe, that definitely comes from our interpretation of the actions, which I do agree a bit. Many of them are shocking.
Yeah, but rapidly upending the lives of the American people.
Yeah.
That statement right there is...
There's a lot of exaggerated language in this.
Yes.
A lot. Next up, one of those new realities is a shakeup of the regular press briefings that the White House press secretary delivers, and that form a core part of the pageantry of American journalism and politics. Trump has put a new face in the job. Caroline Leavitt, 27, who declared President Trump is back and the golden age of America has most definitely begun.
Finally,
been waiting for it.
Like forever, dude.
But the new age is more crowded as digital upstarts and right-wing agitators and activists are now pushing into the space traditionally inhabited by a much smaller number of correspondents.
That sounds sexually suggestive.
For the White House press corps, that means now sharing the cramped briefing room with new media and personalities after the restoration of press credentials for 440 individuals. Leavitt has said had been wrongly revoked by the previous administration, adding that this move would adapt the White House to the new media landscape in 2025. The White House would welcome applications for credentials from non-traditional journalists. Leavitt said, including creators on TikTok, podcasters, and bloggers who are producing legitimate news content. In practice, that means a fight for attention with Natalie Winters, 23, the White House correspondent on Steve Bannon's War Room podcast, among others. Alex Jones, the former owner of InfoWars, claimed he had been invited to come to a White House press briefing next week. Now, I will be very interested in seeing if that comes true. But this is a good example of the evolution of news distribution in the media, right? And the impact of viral news that you can frame on TikTok, for example, a 20-second clip into whatever you want. But imagine some of the conversations that we've had or other people have where it's nuanced, you know? But they pick a clip that portrays something completely differently because there's such a monetary gain in the media now. You know, to have integrity isn't necessarily a payoff.
No, not at all. Not in this, because it's not exciting enough.
It's not.
Like, just telling the truth. Well, it would be, like, if somebody believed it.
Mm-hmm.
But
there has to be that entertainment factor.
I mean, just and you can't even believe what you see anymore with AI. Like, we just saw Donald Trump push Biden into a dumpster.
Right.
From a
hilarious.
Wheelchair.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
I bet there's people out there that believe that.
I believed it the first time I seen it.
No, you did not.
Yes, I did. I thought it was, oh my gosh. I couldn't believe it.
Well, you did.
Well, you just see it for what it is. You know, I just seen him push someone. Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it.
Like all the really hot chicks popping up everywhere that are
not even real.
That's disappointing. I don't know why. I'm still just looking at colored light coming out of my phone.
But another thing, like with this comment about Alex Jones, you know, this is one thing that worries me is like giving these people a place in the press, right? Being brought to the White House gives them a perceived sense of credibility in the public.
Clout.
Yes. And it makes them appear that you can trust what they say. Like this individual, Alex Jones. Do you know who he is?
Mm-mm.
Well, there's a lot of history to him. I mean, he is one of the individuals who you could say was the beginning of much of this engagement culture. I mean, pretty much he monetized conspiracy a great deal. The amount of conspiracies that he has been a part of, the amount of lawsuits, we don't have time to get into it. But if he were perceived as an individual of credibility in the public sphere rather than just his minority population, I think it would be very bad. It would hurt a lot of people. I would say the argument on the other side for the support of this is kind of like the idea of community notes, where we let the public judge the source of information. The only thing is I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing when it comes to individuals who are granted certain positions in an office or, in society.
Kind of like inviting Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk to Trump stuff.
Well,
It gives them a sense of more authority.
they, in many ways, you could argue that they have more authority or more of an impact. Well, they do have, I would say, more of an impact on public opinion and more power than he does on the public. A great deal. Trump has the ability to enact laws, but they have the ability to impact public opinion a great deal.
Isn't that crazy what you just said? When you think about what you just said, media moguls that have media outlets
Mm-hmm.
have more power than the president.
Well, and that's one of the things, this article argues that, that it's Trump strong-arming these sources of media, but, as long as you have like your core audience, that's where your money's at. And they will retain that audience a great deal. And so they will continue to get that money. And if they do have an agenda, which I do believe they do, they would be willing to sacrifice some of that monetary loss if they do in order to push that agenda. So, and I think that even Trump knows that they have the power, even though you could see it as he's attacking them, he's also using them because he's aware of the power that they have. I mean, that's why he's bringing in these people from different social media sites that have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers, because they can post if they're on his side, which they will be since they were granted, a press pass. They can post a 20-second TikTok and portray him in a wonderful way, and it shows that to millions of people in an instant. I mean, it's brilliant.
It's like they're both flexing in front of each other, and then they decided to go work out together.
Yeah. It's really, really interesting. But I do feel that when it comes to power, in a great way, it is the media that has more power than the president, just because of their ability to sway public opinion. I mean, especially if you're a gatekeeper to information, which the media is, you can say whatever you want and say, hey, we can't release this right now. We can't release this information. But people will immediately consume it and believe it.
And some of those gatekeepers don't care about their image. Look what Elon Musk did. Like,
No,
I couldn't
no.
see Mark Zuckerberg doing that.
Yeah, I couldn't either. All right. So, quote, "It's impossible now to speak of media as some kind of monolithic, unified thing we can address," said Robert Thompson at the Newhouse School of Communications at Syracuse University. And I agree with that a great deal. This comes as the post-election news audience slump appears to be ending, especially for right-wing media. Fox News recorded its best January ratings in its 23 history, averaging 1.9 million total day viewers, wish I had that, and 2.78 million in prime time, up 53% and 40% respectively from the same month a year earlier. That is a crazy increase.
Imagine that, though. I wonder what changed.
It is interesting that it happened. Let's see. After Fox News recorded its best January rating in its 23-year history, averaging,
Yeah, when Trump got elected.
Yeah, I would think that it would be more beforehand. Well, no, that's not necessarily true. It would be more now. It would be dependent on what is being covered in the news. And as they said, there's been a ton of events occur, so people are going to be glued to the screen. So that's what I would attribute it to. But Trump, during the first 2 weeks of his second administration, may have figured out how to overwhelm the media's seemingly limitless bandwidth for transmitting information. Joe Biden gave just 36 press conferences during his term, the fewest of the last 7 presidents, barely taxing White House stenographers. Now the White House is reportedly discussing hiring more stenographers to keep up with Trump's public remarks. He delivered 22,000 words on Inauguration Day and 17,000 during a trip to visit hurricane and wildfire disaster sites in North Carolina and California. According to Thompson, journalists are going to have to decide which battles to fight and which stories to follow, as long as their ultimate corporate bosses allow them to. Quote, "Even in a 24-hour news cycle and the infinite amount of internet, real estate to put stuff in, there's such a flood of stories and information that choosing what stories to cover means letting go and resetting on a lot that could be rehashed. They've had to make some concessions that may not, in the best of all journalistic worlds, be the best they could make," he said. Now, this problem I would attribute to just how we cover the news, right? I mean, they cover what is quote unquote breaking news, which it's ironic that every piece of news is breaking news, but it's whatever is trending, you know? But you can choose to discuss something a few days later, right? So what I'm saying is they're saying there's so much information, there's so many events that they're not able to competently cover them and they have to choose it. But
everything doesn't have to be breaking news.
Everything doesn't have to be breaking news.
That's like emergency stuff. Like you got to, that's...
Well, so this goes back to our engagement culture. One of the reasons why they frame it as breaking and they do topical things is because if you portray something as having an immediate effect on your decisions that are to come, you are more likely to watch it. You are more likely to be invested in it. It's, again, an engagement tactic that the media uses to their advantage.
But if they say everything is like that, then it's like,
right.
It's just normal old news.
Yeah, if you say 3 days ago, blah, blah, blah happened, no one's going to watch it. You say breaking, oh my God, this is breaking news. It may affect me in some way.
Even if everything's breaking news?
Even if everything's breaking.
Even after, you don't think, well, actually, yeah, that nowadays, like I was going to say, after a while, people would be like, oh, it's breaking news, huh? Like,
right. Well, and it's that jaded feeling that I'm talking about, because I feel like I have adopted that jaded feeling to this. as just an acceptance of this is just how it is, guys. Like, isn't it just accepted that you can't trust this stuff? That it is biased? I mean, why is this shocking? Why even write about it? I mean, don't we know this is how it works? I mean, the claims about getting money from these corporate figures. I looked into Obama and his inauguration because they made a comment about Bezos and Zuckerberg showing up to his inauguration. Well, in Obama's second inauguration, he had corporate donors. Now, they might have not physically been there, but hey, their money's there, right? What's the difference? I mean, he didn't in the term before, but Bush did too. I mean, it's just how it is, right?
It's more of the public perception because they're right out there like on stage with him.
Right.
What would you say that has to do with it? That they're right there in the mix with Trump?
Well, again, I think that people just don't care anymore. Just because they've become aware that the news is not necessarily the news, at least with some of the population, maybe not all. But, from what I even see like on social media, I mean, I use it to post stuff. There's nothing of really any interest in it.
Not for factual
No
value. I'm right with you. I don't believe like there's almost nothing I feel like I can look at and get like, okay, this is the facts and I'm going to get some good solid information here. It's you got to use deductive reasoning and like your powers of perception to try to shuffle through what might be real and what might not be real. Like even with this, we're trying to figure out which side is it for.
Right.
Like you said, why even post this?
Yeah. It's like the media. So, like when you open up a new package, right, with something fragile in it, and it has all of the little styrofoam pieces to keep from whatever is inside it from breaking, and you like have to start filtering through it in order to get to what you want. Like that is what I feel the media is now, is just tons of that styrofoam crap that is just packed in there that you just have to sift through, and eventually you get to what the hell you are looking for.
Maybe like you might get down there and it's just like, oh, this is the wrong box.
Right. But you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what I just said. You got to sift through it, use your deductive reasoning, which Google is making less of, and like people coming up with Google that can just click and say, hey, Google, what does this mean? Instead of using their powers of deduction to figure it out.
I think that's just going to be a part of the future, though. With AI, we're just going to depend so much on other things. It'll be interesting to see how we incorporate it into our daily lives. But
yeah, I wonder if there's going to be an AI. That would be something. Have AI program on your computer that is like, what am I trying to say? What is that when you get like the cops give it to you to see if you're telling the truth? A lie detector test? Is there something else it's called? Anyways, an AI that from voice inflection and like how somebody looks, their facial, features, their hand movement, whatever, that it can detect if it's a lie or not, or the probability that it's a lie. And so when you're watching your news, like your little AI meter is like, oh,
this guy's lying or she is lying.
Right?
That would be interesting. That'd be really interesting.
Because they can come up with that probably fairly soon.
Oh, absolutely.
And even though it'll be said that that's fake and it's not real, but then maybe you can like test it.
I would argue that a program can be much more reliable than a person. I mean, again, it's dependent on the programming from the individual. But, I mean, if it's open source, if it is available to the public for scrutiny of what it's programmed to do, I mean, that's transparency.
Yeah, until Elon Musk buys it.
Yeah. Well, you got anything else that you want to talk about with this?
Why is everything so terrible?
I don't know, but it's going to be really interesting to see how things change, to see how like this infotainment continues to evolve in our society, and like how much weight we put on different social media sites. I seen something interesting today, actually, and it does say something where a woman posted a photo on LinkedIn, and she was dressed, you know, let's say it was highly sexual, provocative. Yeah, there we go. And there was an individual that made a comment saying, "Is this Instagram?" Saying that. So LinkedIn is perceived as a site for professionals.
Oh,
Okay. So if you post something like that, they're saying, okay, this deserves to be on Instagram. This isn't, something professional. So, it's just interesting to see what we will choose to be good sources of information. It's like we are now choosing certain social media platforms as sources of information. It scares me that TikTok can be a source for information.
Almost anything like that. They need a site like that with an AI lie detector test right in it, so you can watch any information through there, and it'll tell you if the information coming through is the person talking is lying or not.
Something definitely can be done. Well, good stuff, man.
I solved everything just now.
You did. It was amazing. I knew it would come together.
You're welcome, everyone.
Well, everybody, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell when future videos come out or live streams. I hope that this brought up some good points of discussion in the media for you to consider and some good information. So thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great night.